Beloved, hear me today. God does His greatest work in the places no eye can see. The miracles men applaud are never the beginning, they are only the evidence of what heaven has already settled in secret. Before the blessing appears in your hand, God has already released it in the unseen realm. Before people notice the change, the Holy Spirit has already shifted something in your spirit. When hidden seasons come, many people assume they are signs of abandonment, rejection, or delay, but in reality, these seasons are divine training grounds where God shapes the deepest parts of a person's character, faith, and spiritual endurance. Hidden seasons are not punishments, they are preparations. They are intentional intervals where God pulls you away from noise, applause, and attention so He can refine you without interference. In these quiet, unseen stretches of life, God strengthens your inner life in ways public seasons never could. What you learn in the hidden place becomes the foundation for everything God will eventually reveal through you. Hidden seasons develop spiritual maturity, humility, and resilience, qualities that cannot be built in comfort, crowds, or constant affirmation. God uses these concealed moments to clean motives, heal wounds, break unhealthy patterns, and correct attitudes that would later undermine His blessing if left untouched. When God hides you, it often feels like life is stuck or moving backward, but the truth is that God is removing distractions that could weaken your spiritual focus. A hidden season forces you to confront yourself, your beliefs, your priorities, and your dependence on God. It is in isolation that you learn whether your faith is rooted in God or rooted in outcomes, whether your identity comes from Him or from people, and whether your hope rests in His promises or in visible signs. Growth that happens in private is more powerful and more lasting than growth that comes from external validation. God develops private strength because public pressure requires it. If He exposed you too early, you might crumble beneath expectations you are not yet ready to carry. The hidden season is God's shield, not His silence. He keeps you hidden so nothing premature can destroy you. In these hidden seasons, God also clarifies your vision. When you are surrounded by many voices, it becomes difficult to distinguish God's voice from noise. But isolation sharpens your spiritual ears. You begin to discern guidance, conviction, instruction, and direction more clearly than ever before. Divine clarity rarely comes in crowded environments. It comes in stillness. God trains your discernment so that when He elevates you, you can recognize what is from Him and what is a distraction. Many people want elevation but do not want the hidden season that produces discernment, and without discernment, success becomes dangerous. God takes time to teach you what to pursue, what to walk away from, and what to ignore, so when breakthrough arrives, you move wisely and not emotionally. Hidden seasons also break pride. Public attention can easily inflate a person, making them believe they are self-sufficient or deserving of honor. But hidden seasons expose reliance on the wrong things. They strip away false confidence and create humility that recognizes every blessing comes from God, not personal strength. Humility built in the hidden place becomes protection later in life, guarding the heart from arrogance, greed, and spiritual decay. Pride cannot survive seasons where only God sees you. The lack of applause forces you to find your worth in God rather than in people. Hidden seasons remove the craving for recognition so you can become a vessel God can trust. These seasons also purify motives. When no one is watching, only genuine intentions survive. You cannot perform for an audience or impress anyone with spiritual showmanship. You learn to pray because you need God, not because others expect you to. You serve because you love God, not because it earns approval. You push forward because of conviction, not because of applause. Motives purified in hidden seasons become stable foundations for long-lasting blessing. If motives remain impure, blessing becomes a curse. But once motives are aligned with God's will, He can pour out blessing without fear that it will ruin you. Hidden seasons often feel like delay, but spiritually they are acceleration. God develops deep roots before He allows visible growth. Trees with shallow roots fall in storms, but trees with deep roots stand strong. God deepens your roots through silence, struggle, endurance, and private obedience. He matures your praying, your worship, your patience, and your capacity to carry responsibility. What looks slow on the outside is actually rapid internal development. God is expanding your capacity so that when He finally reveals what He has prepared, you can sustain it without collapsing under the weight. These seasons also reveal who truly belongs in your life. When you are hidden, the people who stay connected are those who value you for who you are, not for what you appear to have. Hidden seasons expose superficial relationships and strengthen authentic ones. They reveal who encourages your growth and who only attach themselves to your visibility. God removes the wrong people in hidden seasons, so they cannot sabotage what He intends to reveal later. He aligns your support system with your calling before the elevation comes. In hidden seasons, God also teaches obedience without explanation. He asks you to follow, to trust, to wait, and to move even when the outcome is unclear. This obedience becomes a spiritual weapon. When God can trust you to follow Him in silence, He can trust you to follow Him in success. Hidden seasons train you to act based on God's Word rather than on visible evidence. They strengthen your spiritual backbone so that when challenges arise during the public season, you do not collapse under pressure. Above all, hidden seasons teach reliance on God's presence rather than His visible actions. You learn to feel Him in the quiet, see Him in the invisible, and trust Him in the stillness. This intimacy becomes your anchor. It is the depth of relationship built in private that sustains you when God finally brings you into the open. Hidden seasons are proof that God is investing in you, shaping you, preparing you, and building you so thoroughly that what He reveals later will never be shaken. When God blesses you privately, it is not because He wants to hide you, but because He wants to protect you from premature exposure that could weaken, distract, or destroy what He is building within you. Private blessings are part of God's divine strategy. He understands that not every breakthrough is ready for public view the moment it is conceived. Just like a seed must remain underground until it is strong enough to break through the soil, God keeps certain blessings concealed until they are fully mature. If a blessing is exposed too early, it becomes vulnerable to attack, jealousy, misunderstanding, and interference. God shields it in secrecy so it can grow in safety. This hidden development is an act of love, not limitation. It allows your blessing to form without being mishandled by people who either do not understand it or are not intended to be part of it. Private blessings are also a way God tests and shapes your heart. When God does something for you in secret, you cannot boast about it or use it to impress others. You cannot build identity around it or seek applause from it. Instead, your faith becomes deeply rooted in the reality that God alone is your provider. You become anchored in His faithfulness rather than in the validation of people. When blessings are made public too soon, there is a temptation to rely on the reactions of others for affirmation. But when God works privately, you learn to rely on Him alone. You learn gratitude without an audience and obedience without external reward. Private blessings remove the danger of spiritual pride, and cultivate humility, dependence, and sincerity. God also gives private blessings because He knows human nature. Not everyone wants to see you blessed. Not everyone celebrates your progress. Not everyone is mature enough to handle what God is doing in your life. Some people would criticize it, some would try to control it, and others might attempt to sabotage it. God understands the motives of people better than you do. He sees jealousy before it surfaces, sabotage before it manifests, and opposition before it becomes visible. By blessing you privately, He protects you from unnecessary battles. He shields your miracle from being suffocated by negativity, comparison, or the toxic expectations of those who are not aligned with your destiny. What is hidden cannot be targeted. What is not yet revealed cannot be opposed. Private blessings also train you to hear God's voice more clearly. When the blessing is not yet public, the only confirmation you have is God's word. You learn to trust what He whispers rather than what people say. You learn to walk by faith and not by sight. God uses private blessings to deepen your sensitivity to His guidance, so that when the blessing becomes public, you are not easily swayed by outside opinions. You move from God's direction, not human pressure. You become spiritually stable, unshakable, and grounded in divine truth. This internal stability is essential because public blessings bring new responsibilities, pressures, and expectations. If your foundation is not firm, the weight of visibility could crush you. Private seasons build the strength needed for public seasons. Private blessings are also about timing. God is never rushed. He orchestrates every detail with precision. He knows the exact moment when the blessing will have the greatest impact. He knows when your character is mature, when the environment is right, when the right people are in place, and when the season is aligned. If He reveals the blessing too soon, you may step into a situation that is not yet prepared for you. But when He reveals it at the right time, everything fits perfectly. The blessing does not just appear, it thrives. God waits until the moment when the blessing will accomplish its full purpose. He keeps it private until it is unshakable and undeniable. Private blessings also protect your emotional and mental well-being. Not every breakthrough should be shared immediately. Some miracles require quiet reflection. Some victories need time to settle in your heart before they become public testimonies. God understands your emotional capacity. He knows when you are strong enough to handle praise, criticism, questions, or curiosity. He knows that sudden visibility can overwhelm a vulnerable heart. By blessing you privately, He gives you time to adjust, understand, and appreciate what He is doing before the world sees it. In many ways, private blessings are God's way of preparing you for the larger stages He will eventually bring you to. He builds your confidence in His faithfulness while simultaneously protecting you from distractions. He trains you to focus on Him rather than on the reaction of others. He develops spiritual maturity so that when the blessing becomes public, it does not break you, distort you, or pull you away from Him. Private blessings form spiritual depth, wisdom, and resilience qualities that sustain you in seasons of visibility. God also uses private blessings to separate those who are meant to walk with you from those who are not. Some people only stay close when they see something happening. Some remain connected because of what they think they can gain. But private blessings create a divine filter. They reveal who truly values you, who believes in your journey, and who loves you without conditions. When God blesses you privately, those who stay by your side during the unseen seasons are the ones who are truly aligned with your destiny. They are the ones meant to witness the public manifestation later. Ultimately, private blessings are part of God's protective strategy, mental process, and timing plan. He hides blessings to grow them, shield them, and prepare you. He gives them privately because he cares about your spiritual strength, your emotional stability, and your long-term destiny. In the secret place, he builds both the promise and the person who will carry the promise, ensuring that when the blessing finally becomes visible, it stands strong and fulfills everything God intended it to. When obedience is practiced in secret, it becomes the foundation upon which every public breakthrough is built. This type of obedience is not motivated by recognition, applause, or affirmation. It is shaped in the quiet corners of your life, where only God sees your choices, your sacrifices, and your intentions. Private obedience reveals the true posture of your heart. When you obey God in moments where no one is watching, it proves that your devotion is genuine. It shows that you are not living for the approval of people, but for the pleasure of God. In the hidden place, you learn the discipline of following His voice without needing external confirmation. This kind of obedience becomes the spiritual backbone that supports every blessing God later reveals in your life. Private obedience is powerful because it is pure. When no one knows what you are doing, your motives are exposed. You cannot pretend, you cannot perform, you cannot manipulate perception. You are left face to face with your own willingness to honor God, even when the obedience costs you something. It might cost comfort, convenience, relationships, habits, or personal desires, but obedience in private reveals how deeply you trust God. It is in these quiet decisions, turning away from temptation, choosing integrity, forgiving in silence, giving generously without credit, praying when no one asks you to, worshiping when no one cheers you on, that God sees the sincerity of your heart. These moments build spiritual muscles that cannot be formed on public stages. They are the unseen training sessions that prepare you for visible victory. God often requires private obedience because the public stage is too dangerous for someone who has not been tested in the secret place. If you cannot obey God in the shadows, you will not be strong enough to obey Him in the spotlight. Public elevation brings pressure, scrutiny, and spiritual warfare that require a strong internal foundation. Private obedience develops humility, character, and resilience that protect you from collapsing under the weight of visibility. It aligns your heart with God's will so deeply that when He finally elevates you, you are not swayed by applause or threatened by criticism. You stand firm because your obedience was forged in silence, not in the excitement of public recognition. Private obedience also attracts the favor of God. There are blessings reserved only for those who honor Him in secret. Jesus taught that the Father sees what is done in private and rewards openly. This is a spiritual law. God takes note of every unseen act of faithfulness. He remembers the prayers whispered in the night, the sacrifices no one acknowledged, the battles you fought alone, the temptations you overcame quietly, and the moments you chose righteousness. Instead of convenience, these hidden acts of obedience become seeds planted in the spiritual realm. At the right time, God causes them to produce a harvest that others will see. People may not understand where the blessing came from, but God knows every private decision that made the breakthrough possible. Private obedience also shapes your identity. It teaches you who you are when no audience is present. Many people look confident in public, but are unstable in private because their identity is tied to being seen. But private obedience breaks that dependency. It grounds your identity in your relationship with God rather than in the opinions of people. It anchors your self-worth in His delight rather than in external approval. When your identity is formed in the hidden place, you become unshakable in the visible place. You no longer live for validation, you live for purpose. You no longer seek applause, you seek accuracy with God's will. This shift gives you strength to handle seasons of both abundance and adversity with grace. Another reason private obedience is foundational is that God uses it to test your readiness. Before He entrusts you with greater responsibilities, influence, or blessings, He examines your faithfulness in the small things. Obedience in small, unseen instructions reveals whether you can be trusted with larger assignments. God tests your heart not to disqualify you, but to prepare you. He wants to ensure that when He gives you something big, you will steward it well and not lose your spiritual footing. Private obedience proves your loyalty and commitment. It shows God that you are not following Him for what He gives, but for who He is. Private obedience also protects you from spiritual attacks. When your relationship with God is built on hidden obedience, the enemy cannot easily manipulate you. You become spiritually discerning, aware, and anchored. The enemy thrives on deception, distractions, and pride, but secret obedience destroys his influence. You learn to resist temptation when no one is watching, which prepares you to resist temptation when everyone is watching. You develop spiritual stability that frustrates the enemy's plans. He cannot shake someone whose strength is rooted in unseen devotion. In private obedience, God also reveals deeper dimensions of His presence. There are encounters, revelations, and spiritual insights that only come in the quiet place. Public worship may be loud and powerful, but private worship is where intimacy is formed. Public preaching may inspire, but private study transforms. Public breakthroughs may amaze, but private obedience molds the soul. God speaks differently in private. He whispers secrets, gives direction, reveals purpose, heals wounds, and strengthens your spirit. These experiences become your personal well of strength that sustains you in every season. Ultimately, private obedience shapes the person before the blessing is revealed. It prepares your heart, your character, your motives, your faith, and your spiritual endurance. It builds a foundation strong enough to support the weight of God's promises. Without private obedience, public blessings become dangerous. But when obedience is established in the secret place, every blessing built upon it remains stable, pure, and aligned with God's will. When God forms something in the invisible realm, no enemy, no force, no person, and no circumstance can block it. What God begins in the unseen is protected by His sovereignty, wrapped in His authority, and shielded by His timing. Before anything appears in your life physically, it is first established spiritually. Blessings, breakthroughs, promotions, alignments, and miracles are all crafted in a realm where the enemy has no influence. This is why the devil often fights you in visible areas: your emotions, your relationships, your finances, your environment, because he cannot touch what God is forming in the invisible realm. He has no access to the blueprint God wrote for your life. He can only react to what he sees, but God works in what he cannot see. The invisible realm is where God designs your future. He determines your steps, orders your path, assigns angels, and aligns your destiny long before you perceive any change around you. When you think nothing is happening, when you see no evidence of progress, God is establishing His plan in the spiritual dimension. God's word goes forth like a decree, and once He speaks it, nothing can cancel it. Heaven never drafts weak promises. When God forms something in the unseen, It is already victorious before it ever touches the physical world. By the time the blessing manifests, the battle has already been won. People might think the breakthrough just appeared, but spiritually it was settled long ago. No enemy can block what God forms in the invisible realm, because the enemy is limited to reacting, not creating. He can scheme, but he cannot undo what God has ordained. He can attempt to distract, delay, or discourage, but he cannot delete God's plan. The devil is always late, because he only sees what happens after it happens. God, however, sees the end from the beginning. He prepares solutions before problems arise, establishes victory before warfare begins, and positions blessings before opposition can interfere. Even when the enemy plots, God has already accounted for every attack and woven it into your testimony. Nothing surprises God, nothing interrupts his design, nothing catches heaven off guard. God forms things in the invisible realm because it is the realm of divine protection. When something is hidden in God, it cannot be touched, it cannot be altered, it cannot be stolen. The enemy cannot sabotage what he cannot see being formed. He cannot attack a blessing that is not yet revealed. He cannot block a promotion that has already been decided but has not yet manifested. God allows seasons where you feel unseen, where the blessing feels delayed, not to punish you but to protect what he is forming. He hides the blessing from the enemy until the moment it is strong enough to be revealed without being destroyed. What grows in secrecy grows in safety. What God conceals in the spiritual realm becomes indestructible by the time it comes into reality. No enemy can block what God is forming because God works from eternity, not from time. The enemy operates within time boundaries. He can only attack what exists within the timeline of human experience, but God works beyond time. When God establishes something in the invisible realm, it is anchored in eternity. It transcends seasons. It transcends circumstances. It transcends resistance. Nothing rooted in eternity can be uprooted by earthly pressure. What God forms in the Spirit is reinforced by his eternal authority, meaning it cannot be undone by temporary challenges. Delays do not undo it. Obstacles do not rewrite it. People do not change it. Situations do not cancel it. Heaven's decree stands firm. This is why spiritual warfare often intensifies right before manifestation. The enemy senses movement in your life, but he cannot identify what God is doing. He cannot see the formation, but he can sense the shift. He reacts by attacking your mind, stirring confusion, or increasing pressure, hoping you will quit before the blessing appears. If he cannot stop what God formed, he tries to stop you from staying positioned long enough to receive it. But even then, God's grace sustains you until the appointed time. What God is forming does not depend on your strength. It depends on his sovereignty. Your role is to stay faithful, grounded, and aligned, even when you cannot see progress. God does not ask you to understand the invisible. He asks you to trust him in it. No enemy can block what God forms because God has already predetermined the outcome of your battles. Every victory is written before the conflict. Every breakthrough is secured before the struggle. Every solution is prepared before the problem. The enemy may try to interfere with the process, but he cannot alter the final result. God has already seen you healed, restored, strengthened, elevated, and blessed. What he saw in the invisible realm is the future you will walk into. Heaven's vision is stronger than hell's attack. God also forms things in the invisible realm to develop your faith. If everything were visible, you would depend on sight, not on God. Faith grows when you cannot track progress, when you cannot explain how things will work out, and when you have no evidence except God's promise. The invisible season trains your trust, sharpens your spiritual sensitivity, and strengthens your dependency on Him. The more you walk by faith, the more you move in alignment with heaven's unseen work. Faith becomes the bridge between the invisible and the visible, pulling down what God has formed into your reality. Even when you feel surrounded by opposition, remember that the enemy can only attack what is exposed, not what is hidden in God. What God is forming cannot be sabotaged because His hand is over it. His timing governs it. His power protects it. His will sustains it. The enemy's attempts become irrelevant because God's decision is final. You may hear noise from the enemy, but God's silent work is stronger than any loud attack. You may see distractions, but the invisible plan is still advancing. You may feel pressure, but the blessing is still forming. Nothing the enemy does can overturn God's intention. The unseen realm belongs to God, and everything He forms there is unstoppable. When God's timing arrives, the blessings He prepared in secret begin to unfold with a force that cannot be denied, delayed, or diminished. What was once hidden suddenly becomes visible. What was quietly forming in the spiritual realm begins to materialize in your life in ways that even you did not expect. Public favor is never the beginning of a blessing. It is simply the unveiling of what heaven has been shaping behind the scenes for a long time. When God chooses to reveal what He has been doing privately, everything shifts. Opportunities align, doors open, resources flow, relationships change, and situations reorganize themselves to accommodate the move of God. People will look at your life and marvel at the suddenness of the change, but you will know that nothing about it was sudden to God. He was preparing the blessing long before it arrived. When God reveals a private blessing publicly, there is always purpose behind the timing. He never moves too early, because premature exposure can damage both the blessing and the person receiving it. He never moves too late, because delay is never part of His character. He moves at the moment when you are ready to carry what He has prepared, and when the environment is positioned to receive what He is releasing. God's timing is strategic. He aligns circumstances, events, opportunities, and people so perfectly that when the blessing manifests, there is no strain or struggle in stepping into it. Everything fits, everything flows, everything feels divinely arranged. The orchestration is so precise that it becomes impossible to deny that God's hand was at work in the timing. When the blessing moves from private formation to public manifestation, it often comes with acceleration. Years of invisible preparation can turn into months of visible progress. What seemed stagnant suddenly moves. What looked impossible suddenly becomes achievable. What felt distant suddenly arrives at your doorstep. This acceleration happens because God Himself is behind the momentum. When He pushes something forward, it moves with supernatural speed. Doors that were once locked swing open without resistance. Hearts that were once hardened soften unexpectedly. Opportunities that were once inaccessible become available. The same God who formed the blessing in the unseen propels it into the seen with undeniable power. As the blessing becomes visible, the favor of God becomes evident. Favor is not something you earn through effort. It is something God releases through grace. Favor puts you in rooms you never imagined entering. It places your name in conversations you never heard. It brings support from people you did not even know were watching. Favor makes complicated things simple and impossible things possible. When God decides to reveal His blessing over your life, favor becomes the sign that His hand is upon you. People may wonder how the doors opened for you. how the promotion came, how the opportunity appeared, or how the breakthrough happened, but favor is the answer. Favor is heaven's signature on your blessing. Public manifestation also brings clarity. What once felt confusing or uncertain begins to make sense. The closed doors of the past, the seasons of waiting, the moments of silence, the times of hidden preparation all become understandable in the light of what God has released. You begin to see how every step you took, every lesson you learned, and every battle you fought was part of the process. You begin to understand why God kept certain people away, why certain opportunities were delayed, and why certain situations did not work out earlier. Public blessing shines a light on God's wisdom, and you realize that His plan was better than anything you would have chosen for yourself. When God brings private blessings into public view, He also uses them as a testimony. Your life becomes a living demonstration of His goodness, His power, and His faithfulness. People who doubted your journey, misunderstood your process, or overlooked your potential begin to see what God was doing in you all along. Your public blessing becomes a reflection of God's character. It becomes a reminder that He rewards faithfulness, honors obedience, and fulfills His promises. God uses your visible breakthrough to strengthen others, inspire faith, and draw hearts toward Him. As the blessing becomes public, God ensures that the foundation built in private can sustain it. He knows the weight of visibility, the pressures of influence, and the challenges of responsibility. That is why He builds your character, your faith, your humility, and your discernment long before the blessing manifests. When the blessing finally appears, you carry it with grace instead of pride, with wisdom instead of impulse, and with purpose instead of selfish ambition. What God reveals publicly is always supported by what He built privately. When God's timing arrives, private blessings erupt into public favor. What once was hidden is revealed. What once was whispered becomes proclaimed. What once was forming becomes fulfilled. The private process meets the public promise, and the result is a breakthrough that no one can deny and no enemy can overturn.